A very good morning to you. You are watching Newsline this morning with me, Chaturan Kapwarachi. Unfortunately, Mr. Farah Shaukatari could not be here with us. He's not feeling well this morning, so he had to be taken to hospital. I'm sure all our frequent viewers will wish him good health with me this morning. Before we reveal who are guests this morning, I want to drag your attention to a news report that we carried on our primetime news bulletin last evening. We saw the unfortunate situation where a 7-day-old infant was killed by a dog in the northwestern province yesterday. Situations like this, incidents like this, seem to create a little emotional burden in our hearts, and the situation of our people living in these areas, the plight of these people actually create this sadness within us, that actually if we can help these people out, that is what is important. As human beings, we all have to actually go out and help people in whatever way we can. And in that regard, we are not going to talk about politics, or we are not going to talk about the corruption that is taking place in our country at present, rampant corruption I should say. We are going to talk about helping people out and doing something good actually to the people of our country. We have two gentlemen from the Salvation Army joining us, Major Peter McGuigan, the Communications Secretary of the Salvation Army for the Sri Lankan territory, and Mr. Iraj Vijay Singha, the Chairman of the National Advisory Board of the Salvation Army. Good morning to you both.
Good morning to you, Chatu. Thank you for having us on Newsline today.
Thank you very much for being here. Mr. McGuigan, let me start off with you.
Yeah.
I want to ask you now, the Salvation Army is quite famous here in the Colombo region. People know what you all do. People see your building. I see your building every day when I come to work from the Navaloka side. We know that you all exist.
Yes.
But what do you all actually do?
Well, the Salvation Army, Chatu, has been in operation since 1865, starting in London, England, when the founder of the Salvation Army, William Booth, had a real vision of the extent of the poverty of the slums of East London at that time. And so he began a mission to the people of East London to alleviate the extreme poverty and the conditions that they were living in. And basically it wasn't long before that mission actually spread all around the world. In 1878 they had an interesting change in the structure of the Salvation Army, because until then it wasn't called the Salvation Army, but in 1878 William Booth and his son Bramwell Booth had one of those, light bulb moments where they realised what they were actually doing is fighting against everything that destroys the human spirit and human lives and families. And so they struck on this name, the Salvation Army. And it was kind of like that was a signal to actually spread around the world. And so from that point in time, we found it opening in different countries, including in Sri Lanka in 1883. So if you can imagine that the Salvation Army has been working here for 134 years, that's 134 years of unbroken service. It's like the Salvation Army has grown up with this country through its good times and certainly through its bad times, and it's still today very much providing services to this country that help people in their lives to experience something new, to experience a better future for their lives, particularly, of course, people who are struggling for whatever reason.
Mr. Vijay Singh, I want to ask you a question as well. I want to ask you a money-related question in this instance. Let's say someone donates some money to the Salvation Army here in Sri Lanka. Let's say this person wants to donate 100 rupees for some project that you all do. He or she wants to figure out how much is actually spent on the administration of the Salvation Army, or the process of the Salvation Army, and how much is actually spent for that particular project that you all want to do. How does that work? Do you all keep a share of the money that you all get for the administration of your work, or do you all spend the full amount? What do you all do?
Very interesting question, because I know what goes behind your question, because there are many organizations that are operating where either service fee or the management cost is greater than what actually goes into the benefit of the people. If you look at the accounts of the Salvation Army, you'll find that there's a great amount of money coming within the Salvation Army than what is being contributed locally. And this is the new thrust that the National Advisory Board is now undertaking, is to be not dependent on any outside sources, but within the nation. Because all the work, and as Major Peter just mentioned, 134 years is not a short period of time.
Definitely.
And to have lasted this length of time with types of organizations you are referring to, where accountability is important, here is one you can be sure is accountable. Because they could have not lasted this period of time if they didn't work with integrity, accountability, and also be able to present to the nation, because they have come from outside, present to the nation that they are together with each one. And therefore, we can see that the trust that the people have also had, because it has not got engaged in any controversies, there's no issues involved, they are working at grassroots levels, and this is something, a strength, which is not easy to develop for a length of period of time. So I think that's the stability, the confidence that this nation can have in the Salvation Army.
Mr. McGuigan, when you travel outside of Colombo and actually do the work that you all do here in our country, how easy is it to go there and actually set up? How do you all actually find out what you all have to do, and who does the work in the ground level?
Well, the Salvation Army has a group of officers which are professionally trained for their work, and so we rely very much on those officers who are posted all around the country. So the Salvation Army has something like 50 to 60 outstations around the country in communities, so they actually know and feel very much the needs of those communities. So if a problem arises or a need arises in a community, they will actually propose a program to our head office here in Colombo, and we will work with them to develop the resources to be able to actually implement that program.
The Salvation Army has been carrying out quite a lot of successful projects in our country when it comes to the health sector as well. You all have been helping out the people living in these rural areas with regard to receiving proper health facilities, medical facilities. I want to ask you, how successful have you all been, and what are you actually doing in these health camps?
Well, look, there's a lot of stories that I could share with you, Chaktu. But let me just say that we've had a couple of significant disasters this year in Sri Lanka. One of them was the collapse of the dump in Colombo here, and so more than 100 people lost their lives in that disaster. So we immediately, the following morning, we were on site there providing breakfast for the survivors of that disaster, and then we worked with them for weeks afterwards, meeting various needs. One of our people, for example, noticed that there was a lot of people walking around without shoes. So we were able to organise 700 pairs of sandals for people to be able to wear, so that their feet would be protected, because, as you can imagine, it wasn't a safe place at that time. And then, of course, in May we had the floods, and which devastated a part of the country, and many people lost their lives. But so the Salvation Army, even though our own properties were inundated in the south particularly, we were heavily involved in providing relief from those the effects of that disaster. And even today, Chatu, we have a team of people the Salvation Army is working with are to clean wells that still aren't fit for use in the greater Kalutara district. I think we've undertaken to clean 300 wells in a number of communities. So that's the kind of thing that happens. But let me just tell you something that kind of relates to the longevity of our service here in the country. And that is that for many years, decades and decades, we have had children's and youth residential services operating here in Colombo, in Kochakade, Jaffna, Badikalo, and also hostels for particularly for young men and women who come from rural areas and who need a home away from home to find work. So right here, for example, you mentioned our property earlier on in Colombo too, which is something of an iconic property because it's been there for so long. People wouldn't realise, but we have 2 hostels on that property that accommodate 168 young women who need a home away from home when they come to the city to try and find work. And so they will live there during the week. Some go home on weekends, some stay there, and some have lived there for a number of years. And that is a service which is really important, I think, to the actual life of this country. It's certainly important to those young women and the young men who are in our young men's hostels, but it's also important for the nation because it actually provides a resource that can enable people coming from rural areas to be able to find work in the city and then, of course, support their families back in those rural areas.
Mr. Vijay Singh, a question to you. Now, I'm sure you must be aware of the project that we do here at Newsfirst, the government, the program. There too, the funds that we collect from the general public who wants to actually help out the people directly goes to the people, and all the maintenance, the administration is done by our group, the Capital Maharaj Organization Limited. I too have been a part of the government, the project. I was a group CEO, and when you go out to these locations and carry out the projects, you encounter various problems, administration problems, from maybe the local government authorities, the provincial councils, various political bodies that are set up to actually help and streamline these processes actually become a barrier at one point. Mr. Vijay Singh, when the Salvation Army goes out and actually does these projects out in the open, out in these rural areas, do you have the proper support adequately, if I may put it in politically correct terms? Do you all have it adequately from these bodies that are under the government or from the political side of things? Well,
the current position is that since we've been a long-established organization, when you talk of the Salvation Army, it's not a stranger. It's not somebody's new. And again, to come back to the fact that everybody, whether it's government officials, whether anybody, the Grama Sevak, anybody knows that our intentions, the purpose for which we go out is honest. It is to deliver something, to uplift the people. And therefore, there is no hindrance that comes in, except occasionally you might find somebody who wants a little prominence, so you have to make that accommodation. But in general, the fact that the presence is there and there is no history of issues, problems, has really not been a major issue coming up. And also the purpose for which the programs are, as Major Peter was saying, is people can see, why you're coming. So I think that has helped to a great degree.
So I want to ask you another question. Now let me twist the angles a bit. When the Salvation Army comes into this country almost 100 years ago, 130 years ago, obviously the situation then was different. Then we had to undergo the civil war that was present, a lot of devastation in the north and the east, and even parts of the other side, the west as well. The changes of needs of the people living in our country are going to affect the services that you all provide as well. How do you all cope up with that mechanism? How do you see and how do you ascertain to say this is what these people need, and this is, apart from the projects that we have here, the projects that have been suggested to us by the people you have stationed, what project do you choose and how do you choose it?
Let me give you an example, Chatu. In 2013, we had a politician from the North Central Province, Mr. Athakarole, come to visit us at Colombo at our headquarters because he was worried about the problems with chronic kidney disease. People were and still are dying of chronic kidney disease in the North Central Province. So he is actually in the Polonnaruwa district of the North Central Province. And he was so concerned he decided he would come because he knew about our work. He'd actually seen us in operation in the Polonnaruwa area earlier that year, providing relief from a flood crisis. And so he came and we discussed with him what he envisaged could be a new way of helping the people of the Polonnaruwa district. So we then actually went and visited him and met with medical and health professionals in the area, other political figures, communities, and we made a decision that if it was possible to get the resources we needed, the funding, then we would go ahead. And interestingly, at that time, we had the Salvation Army from Canada contact us and said to us they wanted to invest heavily into Sri Lanka and meeting human needs in Sri Lanka. And they said, could you put this money to good use? And we said, absolutely we could. And so over a period of 12 months, we continued to develop what we thought would be a good way of engaging in preventative measures, so preventing the disease, and also helping people who may already have the disease. So what we are actually doing is building in communities large, high-end wells, and these wells end up being two-storey structures, and they are fully equipped with an industrial filtration plant, each one. We have now opened 8 of those wells, and more than 8,000 people in the Polonnaruwa district have been directly impacted daily by those wells. And I've actually been there. I've been to the opening of 1 or 2 of them where there's a celebration. They're very much a community venture, because the Salvation Army doesn't do anything without being in partnership with the specific community that we're doing this work in. And so by the time the well is actually built and opened, they well and truly own this structure, and the water pumping out through the taps is absolutely clean. And so there is new hope for the community. New life springs up around the well. You know, people come to the well, and not only are they getting their water, they're telling their stories, they're sharing their lives with each other. It's like the well becomes a kind of a community hub. And the 9th and 10th well are almost finished and are about to be opened as well, and then we will continue. So those wells cost, on average, around about 2 million rupees each. Right. And as I said, the community gets involved. We definitely contract in the local community. And alongside that program, if you can think of 8,000 people by just 8 community wells, I mean, that's a very interesting number of people. But alongside that, we are also running a mobile medical clinic where we go about to the outlying villages of the Polonnaruwa district, conducting clinics where we test people for kidney disease and other related ailments. And so on average you would have 200 people would come to one of those clinics. Right. And just last month the number of people tested by the Salvation Army's mobile medical clinic reached 20,000. and more than, just over 1,000 of those have tested positive. So we then link them with the hospital when they test positive, and where they undergo further tests to try and pinpoint what stage of the disease they're actually at, and hopefully it's an early stage, because early detection is absolutely critical. If you detect kidney disease early, which is what these clinics are really all about, then the person who has contracted the disease will have a relatively normal life with one or two adjustments.
Right.
So we're running these two programs, as well as we're actually investing in livelihood programs up there, where the Salvation Army, when we find a family that is struggling, we will talk with them about a way that they might be able to develop a livelihood or a small business, a micro business, where they can actually make some money on which they can live.
Right.
So examples of that would be we've outfitted them with a sewing machine, and they will make garments and sell those garments.
Right.
We've outfitted people with the equipment to actually make shoes, believe it or not. They then sell those shoes at markets.
Right.
And they may make 5,000 rupees a month, which helps them and their family to have a better life. So we're doing that in connection with both of those programs. And the money for the mobile medical clinic actually came from the USA.
Right. Right.
So we have Canada and the USA's inputting here the funds, and we're actually managing, organising and implementing the programs.
Mr. Vijay Singh, I want to ask you a question as well now. We mentioned funds coming in from the USA and funds coming in from Canada. The popular belief, sometimes a correct belief, is that when you come to these projects and when money comes out from various countries, what happens is that there are vested interests coming along with them. And sometimes that assumption is correct. Sad to say, in many cases the assumption is correct. And when this is the situation, how does one trust the money that comes to the Salvation Army to be clear, if I may put it that way?
Yes, that's a very good point, and I think needs also to be clarified. We, with the appointment of the advisory board, we are now having our first annual report coming,
right,
where we will be disclosing the accounts, the performances of the last year, and is going to be made available to everybody. Now, just to carry on your particular point, I think it's very relevant, because we are now, as the advisory board, are going to want to take the Salvation Army to another level, and that is that the present call to the nation is that you can create a better tomorrow. And that's the new call that the Army has now established. Now it says you, and I want to tell all our viewers here, it is you who are going to join the Salvation Army. Yes, we have received funds from overseas. Yes, it has helped the nation, but now we are looking at going to another level where we establish partnerships. We are going to work with you, with the communities. We are going to work with the corporates. We are going to go in partnership, not just merely giving money, because that just creates it doesn't have any form of relationship coming.
Yeah.
So here we are trying to take it to a new dimension, and then be able for the people in the country, the community, the business people, whoever, to join hands and, I would say, enjoy the fruit. The fruit is for us to be able to serve the people.
Yeah, we want to actually empower the country really to take care of itself and to meet its own urgent needs amongst the people.
Yeah.
So the present intention is that if we can achieve that, then we take it to this level where we just don't need anybody.
Mr. Vijay Singh and Major Peter, now, as I mentioned earlier, the Gammadda project that we have done, this is a report that we compiled through the Gammadda with the help of the University of Peradeniya. Almost we have been able to travel all the districts in our country. I too went door to door from in these districts, 2 districts, asking people what their problems are, and everything here is documented and verified by a third party, which is the University of Peradeniya. They too had things like this take place in our country. With time running out very quickly, I want to ask both of you a very short answer. Institutions, corporate social responsibility takes place. From our point of view, we are doing a job here. There are various other institutions. Why the Salvation Army? First, Mr. Vijay Singh, why the Salvation? Why should someone come to the Salvation Army and say, this is the problem, can you find something and do something about it? Why the Salvation Army?
Because it has been there for 134 years, going through all the problems in the country. If any organization, if you look back, can last this period of time with stability, with integrity, with no complaints, nothing happening, then that's the organization you have to work with. Because that shows that whatever you contribute, whether it is money, whether it is your time, your effort, whatever, because this is the partnership we want. And even you now are joining us in this program by even helping us to meet the people and speak to the people. That's the partnership we want to establish. So it's just not purely money. Because we were looking at the corporates coming, they will benefit. They will benefit. Not only the people, not only us. They will also. And that's the type of partnership that we hope to establish in the future.
Mr. Peter, your opinion, your views on this matter? Why should I, if I want to help someone out, being in the Capital Maharaj organization, we have this project already, but let's say otherwise, and why would I come to the Salvation Army?
Well, let me just say, Chatu, that I congratulate Capital Maharaja for initiating Gamadda and for initiating a document like that.
We have taken this to the UN as well.
Yes.
Our Group Director Shevan Daniel was able to provide this at the World Humanitarian Summit as well. But
and we are having conversations with Capital Maharaja about Salvation Army finding a way of working with Gamadda. But it is the trust factor. There is no question that you can trust us not only to handle your money correctly and appropriately, but also to implement programs that will change and transform people's lives and circumstances. There's no question about that. That is our passion, and it is also our business.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here with us this morning on our program on Newsline. I'm sure we, on our part, want to congratulate the work you do, and I'm sure we all are looking forward to see whether the Salvation Army and our Newsfirst government can join hands and help the people living in these rural areas. Because as I mentioned earlier on in the program, we saw sad things happening. Yesterday I was the producer of the news, and myself, I was in tears when I was watching that news report happening. It was very moving. So people are living or suffering, I should say, rather than living. So thank you very much. Yes, obviously.
I can just say one final thing. There was a feature article published in the Sunday Times last Sunday. Someone was reading that on Monday and decided they wanted to donate to the Salvation Army. And they came as total stranger, came in to our office and handed over 250,000 rupees in 5,000 rupee notes, which was amazing to the person who received it. So, and of course, we've since said thank you and properly receipted that. But that's the kind of partnership we want to be in, you know, where people actually see what we do and they want to be part of it.
Yes. Thank you very much, gentlemen, once again.
Thank you.
So we will be joining you tomorrow. I will not be joining you tomorrow, but Faraz will definitely be joining tomorrow. I'm sure Faraz has a lot lined up for tomorrow in terms of politics and corruption, but I'm sure it will be as interesting as it was today. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Saturanga Puarach.